welcome to another episode of the Maine State of Mind. I'm your host, Justin Soderberg, and this is your host, Adam Moore. Never mind. We're back for another episode. However, solo in the studio once again for the hopefully last time. Adam will be baking taking a little trip to Indiana to pick up a dog, and he'll be back soon so we can actually have these regular podcasts again. Little information about this, why we're doing this solo and what we're doing today is because I had a baby. And so things have been thrown for a loop a little bit. Scheduling's been a little off, but we're getting back in the swing of things. Next week, we will do a podcast with Paul Eaton talking about superpowers. He's from Galactic Comics in Bangor. We do our traditional The Pull List, which is a comic book related episode, and he'll be back to do that. And that will come out next Wednesday, again on the Maine State of Mind. And then the following week, we'll have Jack Watkins, who is owner of Spencer's Ice Cream in Bradley. He'll be on to talk as well, and we'll be back in the swing of things. And Adam will be present for most of those as well. So I'm looking forward to those episodes coming up here pretty soon. But quick solo episode to talk about some things. We are not obviously the only podcast that's on the network of the world, and so I wanted to give a little shout out to a couple podcasts, not in any particular order, but we wanted to talk about what other podcasts that we listen to that you should potentially take a listen to. Most of them are based right here in the great state of Maine. A couple that are not, but they're one of them is up and coming, and one of them is that's pretty popular that is sports related. So we thought we'd talk podcasts on this podcast episode and give a little shout out to some of our podcast friends that we like to listen to, and some of them actually been guests. 4 out of the 5 podcasts, someone from that podcast have been guests on our show, which is pretty cool. In the past. So make sure you check us out on Facebook, Instagram, follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, like our all those pages, YouTube, and go to our website, themainstateofmind.com. Tell your friends. We really appreciate all the listeners, and this is it's been fun. I'm excited to do it more and excited to have Adam on to do some fun things as well. So let's get into this. Yeah. So we started this podcast just about a year ago now. Myself solely, but then I had Adam join us and have some, regular guests that have been coming on, which is pretty cool. So, we've been a year into this, and now I feel like it's kind of cool, and I've joined the ranks of all the other podcasts throughout there in Maine and around the world, and excited to do more of them. But we'll give a little shout out to some other podcasts. So let me take a little sip of my Wild Maine Hard Seltzer here. No product placement here at all. So we'll start local, I guess. So Ben Sprague joined us on the podcast back, about 10 months ago to talk. He was a Bangor City Council member, but he's also now, and always has been actually since he was also a council member, has hosted a podcast called the Maine Show podcast, where he talks to different people from Maine on subjects about Maine, kind of like what we're trying to do here a little bit. Ours is a little bit more broader. But Ben's been doing it for a little while now. He's got a few episodes under his belt, quite a few episodes under his belt, and he's doing a really good job talking about Maine and things that are going on here in this great state. So Ben Sprague's The Maine Show podcast, so you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all the places you can find podcasts, or themainshowpodcast.com. Again, these are no particular order. This is just podcasts that we like to listen to on a regular basis. So check out The Maine Show podcast with Ben Sprague at mainshowpodcast.com, or follow him on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, online as well. So that's the first, is the Maine Show podcast. Continuing on with some guests that we've had, Matt Robinson joined us on the podcast to talk a little bit about podcasting, and as well as beer can design and taste room stuff from Bissell Brothers. Him and Noah Bissell, one of the co-founders and co-owners of Bissell Brothers Brewing, have a podcast called Graining In Pod, and they are at Graining In Pod on Instagram, and I believe they can find them on other social media platforms as well. But they talk beer related topics. They have beer guests on. They talk crazy stuff. And they're a little off the wall. Those guys are great, but it's always a good podcast, always a good listen to. They've got some really all-star guests that have come on. Episode 100, they had the founder of Allagash on, which is pretty cool, and then they had some other cool guests on recently as well. But they are awesome listen to. Again, they've only been around for a couple of years now as well, so they're not that old, and they're getting some big traction out there. So give them a listen to at Graining In Pod on Instagram, or find them on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, or you can visit actually, I don't know if they have a website. Didn't even look that up. So Graining In Pod on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, definitely worth listening to, or follow them on Instagram. Matt Robinson and Noah Bissell are kicking butt on that one too. So looking forward to you guys listening to them as well. And continuing on the guest train, Friends from Work. So they're the podcast I listen to the most. I don't listen to our podcast the most, obviously, because I speak a lot on it. But Friends from Work podcasts are the one that I listen to a lot. My wife listens to. I have some friends from work, my friends from work, who now listen to it as well. Some of the regulars at Orna Brewing Company also have that tuned in as well, because they have this cool rewatch that happened that we did during the pandemic. So you can rewatch all the Marvel Cinematic Universe movies, and they give insight on them and their opinions on things, and they give it the rankings and all that stuff too. But ever since about 18 months ago, right around when they started this podcast, maybe a little bit further longer than that, they've come a long way. They joined the podcast back in January here to talk to us about how they started it and talk a little bit about the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But their Marvel Cinematic Universe, their unofficial Marvel Cinematic Universe podcast has gained so much traction that they now have some really cool guests that have been on Disney Plus shows, or you had some composers from some of the people who've done the music for Disney Marvel movies. But Kyle Sconowell and Robbie Earl kick butt at their Marvel Cinematic podcast called the Friends from Work podcast. You can find them at the FFW podcast, and they're at theffwpodcast.com. But again, you can find them all social media. You can find them all Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all those things too. But they're currently doing the reviews and talking about Loki that just came out last Wednesday, which is pretty cool. Episode 2 came out today. And so tune into them. They're great. Two guys, friends from work. They do all theirs via Zoom or via video chat as well, which is pretty cool. But they're both audio people, so their audio is top quality, great listen to, and they have tons of episodes that are not dated. So you can go back and listen to them, watch Iron Man 1, and then listen to their podcast, have them talk about some of their insight and some of their knowledge about those movies, and then watch Iron Man 2 and so on. So they had a really cool watch order. It's a little bit different than other people's watch order of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, as well as they have a really good Instagram where they fit some out of the box thinking and some of the comic books to read when you're getting ready to watch a movie and those kind of things too. So Robbie Earl and Kyle Sconowell are kicking butt at their Marvel podcast, and I can't wait to hear more, and I can't wait to listen to every episode they put out. So follow them at the FFW podcast and the FFWpodcast.com. Find them on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all the different places you can listen to podcasts as well. So give them a shout out and give them a listen. Definitely worth it. So the last guest podcast, although it's a little selfish. So one of my favorite podcasts on the internet right now is Rocking the Dad Pod. That's a podcast that my friend Brian Keyser and I co-host. It's a monthly podcast that we put out that talks about dad-related topics, and we talk to other dads and discuss, being a dad and so on. So that you can find at rockingthedadpod.com, at rockingthedadpod, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, all those things as well. Give us a follow, give us a listen to. If you're a dad, great, it's worth listening to. If you're not, still fun to listen to, because every one of us have a dad or have a dad figure in our lives. It's kind of cool to listen to some of these topics we talk about. And sometimes we get off a tangent and don't even actually talk about dad related things, just things in general. So it's worth giving a listen to. Those come out once a month, so it's not a very big commitment. And we have a new one coming out in a couple of weeks, talk about me becoming a dad, which is pretty cool. So at Rocking the Dad Pod and rockingthedadpod.com, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, yada, yada, yada. Can say it over and over again. The last one is a big podcast that I listen to. I could have gone, I also listen to Joe Rogan's podcast. I listen to, the Fighter and the Kid. I listen to other podcasts that are bigger podcasts that have millions of listeners or thousands of listeners. But the one big podcast I listen to weekly, daily, is the No Dunks podcast on the Athletic Network. I'm a big basketball fan. So No Dunks, I don't know if anybody knows the guys. It's Trey Kirby, J.D. Skeets, Tass Nellis, Lee Ellis, and J.D. They used to be the starters on the NBA TV channel, but now they have their own podcast called No Dunks. It's on the Athletic Network. You can listen to it free on Apple and Spotify, but you can also subscribe to The Athletic at theathletic.com to get commercial free, I believe. They have other things they put on there as well that are only available if you're a Athletic subscriber, but you can also listen to them for free on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. They do live streams. They do unboxings of cards. They do happy hours on Thursday nights. They do all these other cool things that go around the centralized podcast, but their podcast comes out daily during the NBA season and every couple of days in the off season to talk about basketball and all those basketball related topics, which is really cool. at No Dunks Inc. on Instagram, on Twitter. You can find them on Facebook, as well as nodunks.com to listen to to find other links to get to them as well. So definitely listen to those podcasts. We've got, again, no particular order. We've got Friends from Work podcast at the FFW podcast. We've got Graining In podcast, Graining In Pod at Graining In Pod. We've got Rocking the Dad Pod, which is at Rocking the Dad Pod. We've got the Maine Show at mainshowpodcast.com, and we've got No Dunks at No Dunks Inc. All great podcasts to listen to. Any free time you have. Most of those you can listen to while you're doing some other things, as well as some you can interact with your life, watch a movie, watch a TV show, and listen to a podcast like Friends from Work, and etc. So just thought we'd give a shout out to all those people out there doing the same thing we're doing, working hard to bring a podcast to you guys and have you guys listen. So I really appreciate all these guys and girls and what they're doing and how hard they're working, and how I know how uneasy it is actually to do a podcast and have the schedule of doing this. So shout out to all of those guys and anybody else who's doing them. If anybody else has any recommendations of podcasts I should listen to, give me a shout out and I will go ahead and listen to them as well and give them a shot. But again, one last time, Friends and Work podcast, Graining In podcast, Rocking the Dad Pod, The Main Show, and No Dunks. You can find them all on Apple and Spotify, as well as YouTube, most of them, and other podcasting networks as well. So quick episode just to give you guys a little update on other people's podcasts and a little update on what we're doing. So next week will be the Poll List with Paul Eaton of Galactic Comics, and we'll talk superpowers. That's a pretty exciting episode. No countdown, no top 10 list. It's just our top 10 favorite powers and why. And then the following week we have Jack Watkins of the Spencer's Ice Cream in Bradley, Maine, to talk his young entrepreneurship on owning a business. Basically, he took over the business at the age of 18 before he even got out of Brewer High School. So that's a pretty fun story for his too. So we'll get behind that too. And Adam will be on one of those. And then moving forward, he'll be here to talk other subjects as well. And we're really excited about those kind of things. So again, find us on Facebook and Instagram at The Maine State of Mind. You can find our website, themainstateofmind.com. Find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. Like, subscribe, follow, share, all that stuff too. So I'm Justin Soderberg, your host. This has been The Maine State of Mind. I really appreciate everybody listening to it. Have a great day and enjoy the week.